someone, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Salman Khan. I'm an electrical engineer, um, currently working at Olson as a project engineer.
Okay. So, as a project engineer, what do you do?
Um, so let me give you a little bit of my background, a little bit more in detail. Um, well, I'm an electrical engineer, but I've been in the industry for about 8 years now. I started off as just a intern and then moved up uh, to project engineer throughout these 8 years. As a project engineer, I manage multiple teams on multiple projects and different kind of projects.
Gotcha. So, as a project manager, how many different projects do you have to work on at the same time?
As a product engineer, yeah, that's a good question. My line of work is a little bit different. In my industry, I would say that I am the one that handles untypical, I guess, the atypical projects. So my projects are usually they run a year long, and throughout the year, I could potentially probably uh, manage about maybe 2 to 3 projects only simultaneously.
Gotcha. And while you're working on these projects, do you get to manage a team or does anybody help you on this?
Talking about managing a team, as far as that goes, no, nobody helps me. Yes, I do manage a team. For each project, I do have a separate team for it. And then um, the the team consists of about 5 to 10 different people, and some of them may overlap. Sometimes the teams just don't overlap. They're different individuals for different projects.
Gotcha. So 8 people per project, per team. Gotcha. That's cool. Um, and when you start working on a project, how do you set your goals for the project?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I said, my projects are a little bit out of the box kind of question. So usually I would sit down with the client, trying to figure out uh, what their requirements and what their goals are to get to the finish line. Usually in my industry, our goals are pretty, straightforward when the project comes in. As you know, I'm in the, construction industry, and you have to have your drafting, all the models completed and whatnot, and you know what you're building towards. But my projects are again a little bit different, where I just need to sit down with the client and figure out what they need. So
Gotcha.
as far as the project's goals go, yeah, there are a lot of different um, key metrics that we need to look at and set the goals based on those.
So what type of metrics do you look at? Like run me through an example of like how for one project you define goals or how a client would define goals.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I'll give you an example of the keeping track of the inventory as far as the spare parts go. So we'll need to keep track of how many equipment there are, how many equipment we have reviewed, either physically or just the documents, and then also how many um, how many spare parts we need to order, how many spare parts have not been configured yet and need to be ordered, etc.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how do you say like this one thing is not more important? or like would not be a project goal than the other?
Yeah, that yeah, I think you could define just based on the criticality of different things. Um, Now, if I'm getting your question correctly, um, yeah, I think it's really easy to identify what is more important than something that's not.
Gotcha.
So, for example, meeting the deadline um, that has been discussed with the client is potentially a lot more important than if they say, do not worry about reviewing 100% of all the equipment, maybe get through 80% in this time frame. So
Gotcha.
meeting the deadline to review 80% is a lot more important than reviewing 100% and potentially going over the date deadline.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
And so talking about the project deadlines, how or who and how do you determine a project's deadline?
Yeah, so the project deadlines, that is also, again, one of the goals of the projects as well, that is determined by talking to the client and see, when they need it. And also looking at the resources available to me and my team and the hours estimate that we put together. So it's a combined effort, a little bit back and forth, and we can probably come up with a deadline that works both for our client and for us as well. We want to make sure that whenever we talk about the deadline, specifically set a deadline, you want to be confident enough that you can provide them with a good finished product and it's not lacking anything.
Gotcha. So so you want to make sure that you have your project completed and you give them a good um what they ask you to do basically. So what if let's say that you're not able to do um or basically meet a deadline? What happens then?
Yeah, great question. This is a really important question. One thing that I love to, or what I like to do is just communicate to my client as to how the project's going. So I certainly do not wait until the last minute.
Gotcha.
Set, let's say if the project's 3 months long, set bi-weekly meetings with your clients and let them know and update them every couple weeks that hey, we are still on track, or we're behind, or we are progressing, we're way ahead, which might be a good thing. Now, if you're transparent with your client, they will be more likely to understand which the difficulties you have come across. Some of the unforeseen things, they just tend to happen. You just cannot. Some things are out of your control. So just be transparent with them, keep communicating with them, and then most of my clients have been very understanding, and they know things happen. So we usually get the deadlines adjusted.
Gotcha. So it's pretty easy to communicate with them and get it adjusted as
Yeah,
needed. Gotcha.
yes. One
Has
thing I want to add is
yeah,
that you don't want to certainly, again, do not wait until the last minute. And if you can avoid moving the deadline, clients probably going to be more ecstatic about that instead of moving the deadline a month out or something. If it's just couple days are a lot easier to take in than a month.
gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's say on your team, um, you have a team member who's not able to meet a deadline um and they've just communicated to you right before the deadline. How do you manage that? Or has that ever happened? Or um, talk me through like when you had to go through that process of adjusting a deadline.
Yeah, so that definitely has happened to me, and usually someone comes in and they're just overloaded, and it's probably not their fault. It's just you know they just on um, put their hand up for a lot of things that they couldn't handle. So what I have done in the past is, well, I try to look out for it, but sometimes you just miss things, right? But
Mhm.
uh, we put additional resources to, get on top of things as best as we can. The one thing I've learned is to totally avoid that, and couple or few things that I like to do to avoid this scenario is basically having an internal meeting every week, or just based on what your project deadline is. You might do a daily. I don't know how if it's just a shorter project, but do set up a recurring meeting with your team members, check in with them. Um, it's as a project engineer at my company, I'm not the only one with projects. There are other people with the projects too. So whoever pings them the last is, that team member is going to work on their project. So if let's say if you ping them Tuesday, make sure you ping them again, maybe Thursday, and see like, hey, I let's say this task is due Monday. Where are you at with it? So they tend to, whenever I remind them on Tuesday and Thursday, they tend to get to finish or let me know that, hey Salman, I am running behind. Maybe can you reassign it to someone, or can we come back to it next week?
Gotcha.
Mhm.
So I understand that, yeah, you have good team members who will let you know about it, but have you ever had a time where a individual is having he doesn't tell you, and then he's like he has a bad or they have a bad personality, and they don't do their work, and oh sorry, they don't let you know about that they can't reach that deadline. What do you do, and how do you deal with that person?
Yeah, so as I said initially before, that that has happened to me, and what I try to do is basically put additional resources and try to get on top of that problem as the best as we can. There's not a straightforward answer, but yeah, that's that's what we try to do. Just tackle it myself, or have additional resources put on that task to finish it before the deadline.
Gotcha. And in general, so like, what if you're faced with a problem? What strategies do you use to overcome those or to solve those problems?
Yeah. Yeah. I almost every day there's a something going on with these big projects. So basically, I need to what my process is basically just calming myself a little bit first instead of getting frustrated. So you never want to lose your calm, and then maybe do a root cause analysis if it's a problem, or if it's a team member that's just not able to help, maybe. And if it's a constant thing that they're not able to meet a deadline, or they've been just pushing, try to figure out um, what's going on with them, or can they even take on additional responsibilities or not? Maybe finding a different resource. I hope I'm answering your question right,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I'll try to look at the root cause of things, and then instead of just jumping into the problem. And also one thing I want to mention is that whenever you're talking to somebody, try and figure out when you're assigning things to different people and they're responding back to you, you don't listen to respond ever. You listen to solve the problem.